22 years ago, 14-year-old Casey McDaniel seemingly disappeared from this small Tennessee town. She was last reported being seen getting dropped off at her home here. Now, finally, a suspect's been named in the case, and for the first time in several years, her mother speaking out.
She's just a good person.
Cindy McDaniel says Casey was the perfect daughter, one everyone liked.
Good in school, good heart. You know, she loved going to church.
Wondering what happened to her hasn't been easy.
It's just hell because you just don't know.
But Cindy says she thinks she does know who did it. The same man authorities publicly named as a suspect, Finis Hill, also known as Pete Hill. Cindy says she pieced it together within a year of Casey's disappearance and told police.
They had this story 22 years ago, and they didn't do anything about it.
She says Casey was at a back-to-school church party the night she disappeared. A chaperone dropped her off at her Milan home and watched her go inside. That same night, Cindy and her boyfriend went to a gathering at a friend's house in the nearby town of Humboldt.
When we pulled up at this guy's house, we saw taillights leaving, and it was Pete.
She says Hill's wife later told police he came home that night. It wasn't until months later Cindy says she found out that wasn't true.
I just was sick, physically sick. I said, he did it. He did it.
Her theory is Hill thought her boyfriend was coming to the gathering alone and left to go to Cindy's where he thought she'd be. She says she turned him down for sex multiple times and threatened to tell her boyfriend. She thinks he was drunk and wanted revenge.
He gets all mad. You know, nobody turns Pete Hill down. Just got irate about it.
But only Casey was home, and Cindy says she knew Hill well enough to let him in the house.
He was suit and tie, clean cut, you know, new car. And was always polite and nice.
On the surface, that is. Hill has a violent history, including rape and assault charges.
He's a bad enough guy to had done it. And that's my belief and has been since I found out he didn't go home.
She says she told authorities that as well, which contradicts what past reports say.
So them saying you haven't been cooperative, you said that's not true?
No, that's not true.
Early on, suspicion was placed on Cindy. She failed a lie detector test and people questioned her actions, like waiting 10 hours to report her daughter missing.
It was just like a nightmare because they just wouldn't listen.
She says she didn't report Casey missing until the next day because Casey often slept at her best friend's house. So that's what she assumed happened when she came home that night, noting there were no signs of forced entry.
It always reports that the back door was wide open. Well, it wasn't. It was maybe cracked or unlatched, but it wasn't wide open.
They didn't have a phone at their house, so she called Casey's friend the next day when she went to pick up her son at his grandpa's. She said she was ready to lecture Casey for not leaving a note like she's supposed to.
I said, just put her on the phone because, you know, she's not in that much trouble. Just put her on the phone. And she said she's not here, and I knew immediately it was bad.
That's when she filed a police report. At first, she says she did everything detectives asked her to, like take a polygraph test and sit down to do interviews with the media. But soon it started backfiring.
We were misquoted or taken out of context. And then they started printing, anybody that wanted to say something.
Investigators have admitted they had tunnel vision for a while, trying to tie a different man to the case.
It was like they were trying to make pieces to their puzzle fit. They weren't trying to get to the truth of anything.
As years passed, other cases took priority. Then in 2003, Hill was arrested for trying to kidnap a woman at gunpoint and sentenced to 15 years.
I could breathe a little bit because I knew he wasn't out there hurting anybody.
During that time, Cindy stayed quiet, causing many to speculate and come up with theories. One being she sold Casey for a drug debt.
Just to let everybody just rant and rave and comment. And none of it's true. I mean, these were friends of mine from before high school.
She says the worst was when people said she didn't care.
For people to think that you forget about your child and then say it, you have to get really tough-skinned. But, it still bothers you. But She's never been forgotten. She'll never be forgotten.
When Hill was released from prison this January, Cindy said a new set of investigators listened to her. A Milan City employee befriended Hill via a fake social media account in the hopes of getting information about Casey. An affidavit shows disturbing remarks he made to her about beating and raping women. He was then arrested after traveling to Mississippi with the intent to have sex with a 15-year-old.
He's a predator. He's gonna be back in a cage where he belongs.
Cindy says all she wants is for Casey's remains to be found.
If you could say something to Pete Hill, what would you say?
Oh, you couldn't air it.
We may never truly know what happened to the 14-year-old, but plenty of people are fighting to get answers. In Milan, Bridget Chapman, WREG News Channel 3.